What is up, YouTube? Today we're going to be talking about the new frame meter added to 2XKO. The idea is it's more of a visualization of the in-depth frame data that the game has. So if you don't even know what frame data is, this is probably the right video for you as well. It's a big upgrade from what we had, right? Instead of just having this frame advantage here in the top left corner under the health bar, now we have a lot more information to work with, right? And this information can tell us a lot about the game. So for example, a situation like this, the most important number is to know whether Vi's at S1 is unsafe or safe or how minus it is, right? So for example, Vi's S1 from here is 0 on block, which means that we both recover, me and Warwick recover at the same time. If I space it out further because it's hitting in the later part of the animation, I'm actually plus, which means it's my turn. If I do a jab, he does a jab, he will lose. And if I do it really close, it's -7, which means that Warwick can actually punish me. We can kind of tell that all from just the frame meter in the top left corner. And you can get about 80% of the information you need to know about this game, frame data wise, from that number. But if you want to really get into the details and you really want to see certain things in depth, or like you're trying to come up with like cool setups and that sort of thing, the frame meter is really useful for that. So let's talk about what the heck this means. So we'll just go down the list because I think some of these are kind of confusing. And we'll talk about first the startup. And I'll just keep using the same example here, which is Vi S1, right? So Vi S1, you can see how the first part of the move, it says 13. That means it has a 13 frame startup. And actually, you can also tell that by the frame meter here. That middle number is actually the startup in the top left box as well. The second thing is that if you keep scrolling over, on that 13, it's a little hard to see, but it's like this yellow color that's hidden. That just means the first active frame. Why they specify that, not sure. There's another game, Street Fighter 6, that has a similar frame meter. This kind of goes into a little more in depth. The depth's not necessarily needed. Maybe it convolutes things a little bit, but it does add some additional clarity. This is one of them. This is just the first active frame. Why they break it out, I'm not sure, but just treat it as like another part of the red. That's how I see it, right? And then the red is the active frame. So each move is like active for a certain amount of time. This means that there's actually a hitbox you can run into. And that's why Vi S1 has this like variable block stun, right? If I hit it at the beginning of Vi's S1, it's minus because I'm hitting on the first frame, and all that recovery time at the end is still the same. But if I hit it at the tip, you see that in the Vi Warwick like frame chart, it's hitting in the middle of that red period, right? The Warwick gauge starts to feel like colorized during the middle of this red period for Vi, which means that I'm actually hitting in the later part of Vi's S1, and that's why it's actually more advantageous for me as Vi to hit this in the later portion of my S1. There's this active phase multi-hit. I'm not actually sure what that is. It's probably like some it's probably like a multi-hitting move. Again, I just think of that as red. I think it's like active frames that apply to multiple moves. I think it's a little unnecessary. Street Fighter doesn't break this out, but it is there in case you're wondering. Recovery is this blue part. So this is the part where I'm unactionable. Right after the red portion, the Vi row. And even if I whiff, I still have recovery, right? There's a certain portion of this move where I cannot act, I can't block, I can't jump, I can't do any additional button. That's the recovery of the move, and that's indicated by the blue. We have a few things that impact Warwick, right? So if you look at his row, you see this like cyan color that says 25. That means he's in 25 frames of block stun. Yes, I guess I didn't explicitly say it, but these numbers where I say 25 or 20, these are referring to the frames. This game is 60 frames per second, which means if someone's in block stun for 25 frames, that means they're in block stun for almost about half a second, right? Because 30 frames is half a second in a 60 frame game. So when this is blocked, it's this color. When it's hit, it's a slightly different color. It's like I don't know why the colors are so similar, but it's this like bluer color. That just means they're getting hit. I personally have a really hard time distinguishing between the colors, but you can look just to see if they're getting hit or not. Black is this idle, right? So if you see just black, it means no one's doing anything. So that's why this Warwick Vi if I do S1, the first portion of the S1, Warwick's is black because he's just not doing anything. Defensive actions, if I had to guess, that's probably like a Braum shield, and it's just indicating that you're hitting the Braum shield. Let's actually test to see if that theory is correct. What the fuck is defensive actions mean? I was actually thinking get up attack, but maybe retreating guard. Oh, very interesting. It's a color that's not even on here. What the hell is white? I think white is like movement, if I had to guess. So the fact that you're retreating guard, it counts as movement, and then therefore that's what happens. All right, but yeah, we'll call that dash frames. So maybe let's try push block. Oh yeah, so look, it's defensive action. So as you can see, the Vi is actually the character that's doing the defensive action, and in the actual Vi chart, I know I'm like kind of in the way, but you can see that Vi is stuck in this like push block stun, and that's what defensive action means, right? So something like that. The couple other things, attack is charging, right? So it's just this like exclamation point. Why it's only those 4 frames, that's kind of weird. Even though you can like delay this a lot, it just indicates that those 4 frames are charging. That seems kind of weird to me. But yeah, I guess indicating something's charging is cool. Armored state obviously refers to something like Braum. It looks like a little bit different than this, but you have that. All right, question for the class. What does asymmetric hit stop mean? Yeah, this one took me a while to figure out too. It actually refers to something like a fireball. So when you do a fireball, usually it's the character, or any type of projectile, it's the character that is blocking it doesn't have this, like the game freezes for them a little bit. So like anytime I do like a move, there's like a slight, very, very slight freeze of the animation for a physical attack. But for a projectile, the character that's throwing the projectile doesn't stop. The game doesn't stop for them, but it stops for the opponent. So that's indicated by this asymmetric hit stop. Honestly, you could just ignore this one too. Again, Street Fighter, I think, simplifies things. They don't include this. I don't think it's really needed, but it probably helps like the devs when they're making their game and that sort of thing. So it's probably just included for that. And invertible means, right, it's referring to anything where the opponent just can't be hit. And it's pretty straightforward. So the question is, now we have an understanding of what all these colors mean. When would you actually use this thing? Because again, you already have a frame counter, and it's kind of similar to Street Fighter 6. You can see, it helps you see like the gaps in certain things. So for example, if I'm doing a Vi Alawi sequence and I want to make my things as gapless as possible. All right, I'm learning Vi Warwick. How do I make sure this is gapless on block? So what I can do is I can look, now that I'm playing P1, I have to look at P2, right? And I want to see if there's a gap in the block stun of Vi, and you can tell there's not. But if I delay it, if I delay the Warwick assist, I can see how much of a gap there is. And the thing is, when I'm doing like these kind of, I turn on sticky keys, that's crazy. So like, let's say I'm doing something like this. The goal is when I'm creating a pressure sequence like this, or here like this, I want as small of a gap as possible. So this, I actually didn't know this, even though I play this team. This gap is huge. If I do stand medium punch into assist, I have maybe like a 10 frame gap. That 10 frame gap is actually really bad. I want like a 1 frame gap. So the question is, how do I get a 1 frame gap? It looks like if I just do stand heavy punch into dash, that's actually way more advantageous. It looks like it looks a little variable. It looks like here that's a 3 frame gap, that was a 4 frame gap, that was a 1 frame gap. But it looks like generally I'm beginning to be gapless. And it looks like I can make it gapless as long as I call the assist at the right time. But you can use it to create these kind of sequences where you either figure out how much you need to make something gapless, or you make it so there's just like a 1 frame gap, so it's really hard for them to parry or mash or that sort of thing, right? And I can tell here it depends on the timing. So if I wanted to like drill this out, I could actually drill it to make sure that I'm actually getting just the 1 frame timing or pretty close to it, right? Because if I'm getting this like 6, like let's say I have a huge gap like I had here, they could actually throw that gap. That's not good, right? If they're just mashing throw, I get hit. and my sequencing therefore is not going to be as good. The way I see this frame tool being used is most of the time just knowing the frame counter is good, but if you're trying to create like good sequences and good like optimize your mix-ups, I think this is really nice. Another example is actually this is something I was playing around with, right? I'll call Warwick. If I parry, I can see I'm plus 48. All right, how do I stop Vi? Is there a way to jail Vi, the opposing Vi, after I parry? Here's the idea I had. And I can look at the frame here. Yes, that's really hard. That is a huge gap, right? And so maybe there's something I can do to check. And so there I can see that has a gap of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which means that Vi can most likely mash a jab and screw me up. So now I can see if there's anything I have that could potentially frame trap after this. And so like here I can see it looks like S1 has about a 3 frame gap after I parry assist. As long as I do everything as quickly. Actually, that only had a 1 frame gap. So that's actually pretty ideal. So that'll make parry very hard to time as well. And if I'm like really sweaty, I can call assist behind it and then get a combo. Or I could just get pressure just off of 1 assist parry. So I really like the idea of that. But now I can actually tell how big of a gap there is. And, you know, I could obviously further optimize that sequence and that sort of thing. Yeah, this is the frame meter. For most of the things, like, for example, if you're trying to see if something's punishable, I recommend just using the frame counter at the top. It's pretty useful. Oh, another thing I was actually really curious about, and I might as well test it. I just want to know how big of a gap there is in between this, right? I know that people can parry it, but now I know that it's actually a 3 frame gap, right? Which means that you have a wider parry window than I thought. Pretty cool. But yeah, I use the frame counter for most things at the top left. But if you're trying to like design sequences, or if you're trying to figure out like how do I get a mix up off this knockdown, or like stop mashing and that sort of thing, I think this is a little bit better because you can actually count the frames, and with experience, I think you can design better situations and that sort of thing. But for most players, like if you're not like in Grandmaster already, like you don't need to worry about this, right? Just play the game, and I think stuff like this will naturally come to you. Just play the game. Anyways, that's it for the frame meter. Pretty cool. The implementation's a little harder to read than Street Fighter 6, but I like the idea of having so much data, and for like really sweaty players, the more data the better, right? So pretty cool. Glad they added it. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Take care.